Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Joy Reid Show. Happy Wednesday. I want you to be sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you have not done so already. We so appreciate your support for independent media. We want to make sure we keep it going, so like and subscribe. Thank you. And we have a lot to get to tonight, a lot of big guests, including an update. I want to start with this update on a story that we've been talking about all week, and that myself and Texas State Representative Yolanda Jones went live on for an hour last night. And thank you all for tuning in for that. So after a full day of media speculation yesterday that was all over social media and which prompted our live, that the Texas Democrats were preparing to give up the ghost and go home after Governor Greg Abbott announced that he would end the special session that he called to bow to Donald Trump's demand that he gerrymander him 5 more seats, which of course the Republican-controlled Texas legislature is seeking to do by stealing 2 seats from the 4.3 million Black residents of Texas, plus a seat from the state's Latino majority. And with Texas Democrats generally declining to call the gambit what it is, namely a racist gerrymander, it now appears that the push by a small number of Black Texas Democrats, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, Congressman Al Green, both of whose seats are being targeted in this racist gerrymander attempt, and particularly State Senator Yolanda Jones, whom you have seen right here on this very program, to actually name the thing, show the maps, and keep on Texiting by staying out of the state. It appears that the caucus is finally listening, according to a statement from the Texas Democratic Caucus, which was posted on social media earlier today. Here's the quote. After deliberations among our caucus, we have reached a consensus. Texas Democrats, now this is important, refuse to give Abbott a quorum to pass his racist maps. Congratulations to the caucus for doing the right thing in defense of democracy, in defense of Texans, and big ups to State Representative Jones for naming and claiming what this thing has always been, and for pointing out that the Supreme Court is watching. It's not a political gerrymander, it's a racist gerrymander. And by calling it that, the Texas Democrats have actually not only done the right thing, they've actually helped their case when it gets to the Supreme Court. So kudos to all. Also on that front, California Governor Gavin Newsom has announced that he is formulating the punishment should Texas Republicans get their racist gerrymander map through. Newsom posted a deliciously trolly post mimicking Trump's own style, reading, Donald Taco Trump, as many call him, missed the deadline. California will now draw new, more beautiful maps. They will be historic as they will end the Trump presidency when Dem takes back the House. You go. You go, Gavin. We kind of love Gavin Newsom right here. He's welcome to come on the show anytime. Open invitation, Gavin. Well done. Now, I'm told that drafts of the new proposed California maps could drop as early as Friday up to maybe next Tuesday, though due to a constitutional amendment, one potential option to get those maps through now, because their amendment says that they can't gerrymander outside of the census year, but there's a possibility that the state legislature in California will hold a special election this November to change the Constitution in order to allow the mid-cycle redistricting. And note, please, that New York also has a constitutional amendment, and other states are also figuring out their versions of the punishment if Texas somehow manages to get their racist gerrymandered maps through. And by the way, again, they can't do it without a quorum. And their special session technically ends Friday, but the governor says he's just going to do another one. So as long as the Texas Democrats keep Texiting, no gerrymandered racist map. So kudos to the Democrats. Now, meanwhile, Washington, D.C. is now under what amounts to Trump martial law, with members of the National Guard wandering around the monuments and streets of the district. We've even heard reports of police presences near Howard University. Mayor Muriel Bowser, who issued a rather sedate statement yesterday, a calm statement, changed her tune completely overnight during a virtual town hall, calling on members of the D.C. community to protect our city, protect our autonomy, protect our home rule, and get to the other side of this guy and make sure we elect a Democratic House so that we have a backstop to this authoritarian push. So you see how this story connects with the Texas story, because Texas right now is holding the line, and California is where you could wind up flipping that house so that Trump will actually have to be accountable. Meanwhile, though, The authoritarian, who's vowing to take over even more cities that have black mayors, is making himself the host of the Kennedy Center Honors, which he will now host himself, while, of course, also complaining that he never won a Kennedy Center Honor himself. He's like, they never gave me a Kennedy Center Honor, but I'm going to host it because, I don't know, and he's going to honor, some maybe used to be A-list Hollywood stars that he likes and some other folks as well. And the regime is in the process right now also of bogarting the Smithsonian to ensure that the exhibits in the national museums will comport with Trump's vision of a cleaned up American history with no negative information, just in time for the nation's 250th birthday. Nothing at all fascistic about that, or the creation of a surveillance police state, nothing at all. Meanwhile, God bless South Park, which has doubled and tripled down on mocking puppy-killing Homeland Security Director Kristi Noem, as their ratings are like through the roof, booming. They're actually taking a week off because their ratings are so good, they're just churning out more episodes. They're literally like the hottest show right now because of their mockery of Trump and friends. If you have not seen their latest episode, I promise you it's worth it. You absolutely should watch it. Okay, let's get to tonight's news. The issue of genocide in Gaza, on a wholly different note, has frankly been really difficult to approach in the mainstream Western press, including in Europe, but especially here in the US, in American media. But there are some journalists who have actually been really crystal clear about Israel's policies toward Palestinians long before October 7, 2023. I want you to take a listen to one of those journalists.
My old office in Gaza is a pile of rubble. The streets around it, where I went for coffee, ordered maftool or manakish, had a haircut, are flattened. Friends and colleagues are dead, or more often have vanished. Last heard from weeks or months ago, no doubt buried somewhere under the broken slabs of concrete. The uncounted dead in the tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands. Israel has made Gaza a wasteland. 50 million tons of rubble and debris. Rats and dogs scavenge amid the ruins and the fetid pools of raw sewage. The putrid stench and contamination of decaying corpses rises from beneath the mountains of shattered concrete. Palestinians, 90% of whom are displaced, risk death from unexploded ordnance left behind after 18 months of airstrikes, artillery barrages, missile strikes, and blasts from tank shells, and a variety of toxic substances, including raw sewage and asbestos. Israel, supplied with billions of dollars of weapons from the United States, Germany, Italy, and the UK, created this hell, and it intends to maintain it.
Joining me now is the man that you just heard, journalist Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize-winning former Middle East bureau chief of the New York Times. His new book is called A Genocide Foretold, Reporting on Survival and Resistance in Occupied Palestine. And we're going to show a cover of his book shortly. Chris Hedges, I want to thank you so much for joining us. You have been, I would say, one of the most forthright and straightforward journalists when it comes to talking about Israel and the Palestinians and the treatment of the Palestinians, even before October 7. And I want you to, if you can, kind of help me grapple with why it seems to be so difficult for so many in Western media to do that.
Because there's a cost. The Zionist lobby is fierce and strong. And I speak as somebody, I spent 7 years, of course, in the Middle East. I was the Middle East bureau chief for the New York Times. I'm an Arabic speaker. So for that reason, I was, when I reported out of the Israel-Palestine area, it was primarily with the Palestinians. But if you stand up and speak the truth about the apartheid state and about the indiscriminate use of industrial weapons to carry out slaughter against, I would argue, a largely defenseless population. Remember, the Palestinians do not have mechanized units, an air force, a navy, heavy artillery, any serious kind of command and control, you are rapidly pushed aside by, or your reporting is neutralized. I mean, when I reported out of Gaza, for instance, with Israeli airstrikes, the way they neutralized the story was, even though I was interviewing eyewitnesses, even though I was on the ground, every other paragraph was the IDF spokesperson, which didn't happen in any other conflict. I covered the war in Yugoslavia for the New York Times. That didn't happen when I covered the war in Bosnia. So it's really, really difficult to penetrate and speak the truth about what's happening on the ground. Although I think this live streamed genocide has kind of ripped the veil off of, the very successful, up until now, successful effort on the part of the Zionist state to control the narrative.
As you said, the live stream genocide has been carried a lot by very, very brave, often very, very young Palestinian journalists themselves, because Israel does not, and the BBC has acknowledged this, they do not allow journalists to do their journalism unfettered without an Israeli minder. They're actually just not allowed to be in Gaza independently generally. So it has been Palestinians themselves who've been live streaming, who've been posting, who've been on social media, and they have been systematically killed off. We just saw Al Jazeera, which is one of the few organizations that still had a fairly substantial cohort of media in Gaza. 5 of their journalists just recently killed in a targeted assassination. What do you make of the relative silence of members of the Western media when journalists, 237 killed so far? This is one of the deadliest conflicts for journalists ever, but not a lot of talk about that in the West.
I mean, I covered the war in El Salvador for 5 years. As I said, I covered the war in the former Yugoslavia, and it was scary and horrific. I think we lost 22 reporters and photographers in Salvador, I think 45 in Bosnia, but nothing compares to Gaza. I mean, the Western media has really failed. My old employer, the New York Times, has failed. It's really embarrassing, frankly, and shameful. Al Jazeera, and I, in full disclosure, am off and on Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera's flown me twice to Qatar to do broadcasting on both the Arabic and the English service, has done heroic work. When you go into the building with Al Jazeera Arabic and you walk down the foyer, it's picture after picture of murdered journalists. It's quite chilling. These journalists have been targeted the same way doctors have been targeted, the same way UN workers have been targeted. And that is part of Israel's systematic effort to destroy civil society. It's really chilling. And as you, Joy, pointed out, it dwarfs any conflict, any modern conflict, including the ones that I covered. And this isn't journalists being killed on the front lines. These are journalists being targeted. I mean, the latest, the 5 Al Jazeera journalists were in a tent recharging because they have to use solar power. But that's been true for doctors, and we know that they are killed by drones, either leaving their shift or coming into their shift, or their apartment is blown. So in a multi-story apartment building, the apartment of the doctor or the apartment of the journalist, or even writers and poets like Rifat al-Hariri and others, they are targeted, clearly targeted. And it is appalling. Of course, the press has been completely locked out. The foreign press is not allowed in. And Palestinians have just done heroic work in transmitting what's been happening. But this is about erasure. It's about, and part of that erasure is the erasure of the story itself, the erasure of the reality of what's happening, not just the physical erasure. That's happening too. So yes, it is unlike anything we've seen in the modern era.
Yeah, and it's so thorough that what you're seeing is, every church, every school, every mosque, every hospital, almost every hospital is gone. And even the antiquities. I remember doing a story at my old job about a little theater. This is just a little theater where Palestinian artists were operating, obliterated. It is as if what the IDF and what Israel is trying to do is to erase the memory that Palestinians were ever there. And I assume that that's why the ICJ deemed that this is a credible genocide.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to, I mean, that's why they've bombed the archives. And as you pointed out, the archaeological museum, all the universities have been destroyed. Anything that is a repository of historical or cultural memory or historical or cultural expression is destroyed. And they have very much targeted the elite, the educated elite, which is also true in any genocide. Go back and look at the Armenian genocide or any other genocide. So, yes, that's right. This has been systematic from the beginning. It's why they destroyed the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which is absolutely vital. It runs most of the schools, the clinics, 400 aid distribution. They shut it down because it is, as in any genocide, it is about extinguishing not just the people, but all of the systems that support life, that sustain people in Gaza, including the water treatment plants, by the way.
Well, I mean, we do recall that the defense minister said there'll be no water, there'll be no food,
Yeah.
there'll be no fuel. I mean, they actually
Yeah.
sort of broadcast in advance that this is what they were.
No, from the
what they
beginning,
were
they've
going to do.
been pretty upfront about it. I don't know why Zionist supporters can't figure that out. It's not like it's been hidden. They talk
Right.
about raising Gaza, bombing it back to the Stone Age. One cabinet minister said, we should drop a bomb on it. And then, of course, the way they refer to Palestinians, human animals and this kind of stuff. No, it's been, and in the, the ICJ report, it's well documented. So yeah, you're right. It's not hidden. I mean, Hitler didn't hide it in Mein Kampf. And I'm not saying that they're Hitler or Mein Kampf, but I mean, oftentimes these genocidal projects are quite out in the open, and that is true with Israel.
It is indeed. Let's talk about the sort of thing that seems to have cracked open just a little bit of the sort of heartstrings of the mainstream, at least Western media, at least here in the US, has been the starvation campaign. And you can't starve people in like a month, right? Meaning that
Yeah,
food
that's
must
right.
have been being withheld for many, many months for you to see emaciated babies, emaciated mothers, breastfeeding women who cannot produce milk. Like, this is months of starvation. And I wonder if you can wrap your mind around, now people are expressing outrage about that, which I guess is good, but there's been a very, very slow actual response from states, from countries. You're now seeing Europe saying, well, we may recognize a Palestinian state to punish you down the road. We may, withhold some arms. I think Germany is saying we may withhold some arms, but it's been really slow.
Well, it's performative. I mean, the fact is there's no disruption in the flow of weapons. What the arms that Germany, I think they're primarily naval weapons. I mean, it's not even clear that they'll have any effect. Of course, most of the weaponry comes from the United States. Israel depleted its munition stocks, of course, a long time ago. Well, I think you're right, Joy, that the starvation issue, you can't militarily justify that. You can say, well, we bombed a hospital because, it's a Hamas command and control center, or we killed Al Jazeera journalists because, they fire a rocket, which is patently absurd, but fire without, of course, providing any evidence for these claims. They fire rockets. But with starvation, what can you say? But I will say, I cover the famine in the Sudan. It takes 40 days. Once food is cut off, it takes 40 days. Although children and the elderly, of course, die at a faster rate. And that's what we're watching. So you're right. It isn't overnight, but it's cumulative. And what happens is that eventually you get an explosion of people dying of starvation. I think we're already beginning to see that. And what they've done very cynically, the Israelis, is use food as a weapon through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. There are only 4 distribution points. They're only open about an hour a day. About 1,000 Palestinians have been killed in the rioting. I mean, when you go into those food distribution points, you carry a knife, either to protect yourself or to steal food from someone else. I mean, it's savage. It's meant to be savage. And they use that as bait to lure people to the south, to put them in ringed military zones. So they're talking initially 600,000 Palestinians, then up to 1 million. And of course, they're negotiating with countries like the Sudan to deport the Palestinians. That's ultimately the goal, put them in a kind of ringed concentration camp, lure them there through food packages, which are, nobody pretends that this is an adequate food distribution, but it's the weaponization of food. And that's again, a kind of hallmark of the last chapter of all genocides.
Let's talk a little bit about October 7th, because, one of the things that, has been not encouraged. I've, like you've worked in mainstream media. There was not a lot of interest, I shall say, in U.S. media of context regarding what was happening on October 6th, 2023, and what conditions were like for Palestinians leading up to that, and what might have, led Hamas to do that attack, which was the deadliest attack on Israel. Can you tell us, since you're a journalist and you've studied this area a lot, what was going on in Gaza before the October 7th attack?
I mean, you're right. It's context. It's all context. And so for those of us, I reported 7 years out of Gaza, we kept saying you can't treat people like this. There is going to be an explosion, a great poem by Langston Hughes, A Dream Deferred. So there will be, and people will react as they did on October 7th. Norman Finkelstein has likened it, I think correctly, to the Nat Turner Rebellion. Nat Turner, I think, killed 44 whites, including women and children, any white that he saw. That's not to, of course, condone it, but we have to understand. And I think what we really saw is akin to a kind of slave revolt. People have been trapped in there for 16 years. There's no work, especially for young men. I've been, of course, in the refugee camps. They're sleeping 10 to a room. There's just this horrible despair, stagnation, and then Israel periodically, in their cynical phrase, mowing the lawn, will just use attack jets to bomb refugee camps and artillery units to gun down Palestinians. That's what happened. I also want to say that there's pretty clear evidence that because the Israelis were flying blind, all of the watchtowers have been taken out. Most of their military installations along that, I think it's a 27 or 37 mile border, were overrun. They didn't know what was going on. So they were firing on any cars that were going into Gaza, back into Gaza. Many of them held Israelis. They bombed Erez, which was the main checkpoint, when they knew they had their own soldiers in it. So I'm not in any way saying Hamas or other Palestinian resistance forces did not carry out atrocities, especially at the music festival. Without question, they did. But it was, it's all context. And I think for those of us who spent as much time as I did in Gaza, it wasn't a surprise. When you treat people like animals, when you speak to them solely in the language of violence, exclusively in the language of violence, then eventually that's the language they're going to speak back. C.L.R. James writes about this in Black Jacobins, I think quite presciently, because in the Haitian liberation movement, the only successful slave revolt in human history, there were atrocities that were carried out against the white slaveholding class, French slaveholding class. But as C.L.R. James points out, this was a momentary passion, and to draw an equivalency with the long nightmare of oppression that enslaved people endured, or the people in Gaza endured. There's a disequilibrium there, and I think part of the problem with Western media is they create this kind of false equivalency. I mean, you have the language that the Palestinians are Nazis. I mean, this is insane. They're trapped in an open air prison. They don't have industrial weapons. They're being bombed right and left. I mean, even on the Great March of Return, which was almost exclusively nonviolent, Israeli snipers were shooting down medics and journalists and people, and often seeking to maim them for life, which they did. We can't, that equivalency is part of the false narrative. This is an oppressed population. Hamas is, and I knew one of the founders of Hamas, Abdelaziz Rantisi. I knew them well. I spent a lot of time with Hamas, and I don't condone many of the tactics. I was there for the suicide bombings of the buses, which was appalling, of course. But most resistance groups, including the ANC, including the Zionist groups pre-1948, adopt terrorism. But I think that's Hamas is a national liberation movement. You may not like its ideology. You may not like some of its tactics, but it has genuine support. And when I was with Rentisi, he talked about it. He said, we don't I don't know to what extent Hamas has changed, and Sinwar was a very different person from Rentisi, who was a doctor, a highly educated pediatrician. But he said, we invite anyone to join the National Liberation Movement. So there's we speak with these kind of slogans and cliches and have this cartoonish vision, which is perpetrated by the media, but it absolutely distorts what's happening. And I think the demonization of Palestinians and really largely Muslims, that's one of the most galling aspects of attempting to cover this conflict honestly.
That and absolutely, and sort of creating into them and sort of making them the Muslim boogeyman. When I think a lot of Americans are very belatedly finding out that little town of Bethlehem is a town full of brown Christians, of Palestinian Christians, and that many of the biblically named, still named, places that are now inside of either Israel and the occupied West Bank are full of Palestinian Christians. So I think that people don't necessarily know who Palestinians are.
Let's be clear, Jesus wasn't white. The Romans were
correct.
White. Jesus was a
Correct.
person of color, as my friend Jeremiah Wright reminds everyone.
Well, that and don't get me started on Abraham being the father of both the Muslim, Christian, and the Jewish faiths. And so there are a lot of brown people there, Mizrahi Jewish people and Palestinians who look almost identical, because some people picked Islam, some picked Christianity, some picked Judaism. So there are people there that
allow DNA tests in Israel, because I bet if you went to Gaza or the West Bank, there'd be a lot of shared DNA.
Right. It's absolutely true. And I mean, there are the Europeans that came over that are a different group of Jewish people, but there are Mizrahi Jews that are indigenous to the area. My sort of exit question to you, Chris, is where does this end? Because I think that, for all my life, I've been paying attention. I feel like for all my life, I've been paying attention to this issue and have had an empathy for the Palestinians, because they seem just sort of a people without empathy in the world. And so there's something about their story that has always sort of resonated with me. And I've always wondered, at what point does this nightmare for them end? Do you see how this ends? Because it seems that in Bibi Netanyahu's vision, it ends with them all deported to somewhere, but gone from the West Bank and Gaza.
Yeah. Well, that's clearly the goal. I don't see anything to stop. The only two ways to stop it are outside intervention. I covered northern Iraq when Saddam Hussein was driving the Kurds out. The NATO forces imposed no-fly zone, and Iraqi forces had to withdraw below the 38th parallel. I don't see that happening. That's one way. The other way is for the United States to stop sending weapons. Short of that, unfortunately, I think the demented vision of Bibi Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and these rabid right-wing Zionists, unfortunately, is there's no stopping it. I mean, look, nobody is stepping in. I mean, it's almost beyond belief. Nobody's stepping in to stop the starvation in any meaningful way, with the exception of Yemen. Nobody has attempted to stop this genocide. And unfortunately, if there's a lesson from the Holocaust, it's not never again. The lesson is we don't care. And nobody really cared about the Jews during the genocide carried out by the Nazis. Nobody really cared about the Armenians when I was in the south of Sudan. Nobody really cared about the Sudanese, Rwanda, Pol Pot. So I don't see anything, outside of either intervention or sanctioning Israel, which the Trump administration is not going to do. I think that this nightmare not only will continue, but the goal of depopulating Gaza will succeed.
Chris Hedges, whose dog is jumping in. I love it when a pet joins in. Mine is right next to me.
Yeah. So
no, she is preparing to bark at any moment. If she hears your dog, she's going to jump in as well. So thank you.
So I guess they woke up for you. I don't know.
Amen. Amen. Well, we always welcome pets on the show. Chris Hedges, thank you so much. The book is called A Genocide Foretold: Reporting on Survival and Resistance in Occupied Palestine. I've already ordered my copy, sir, and I hope you will come back. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you. This is a rough story, so I appreciate Chris Hedges coming through. He is one of the most honest and smart journalists on this, and we do need to have that context. It's really important. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, share this this channel. Make sure that everybody subscribe to the YouTube channel. 70% of people are lurking, watching these shows and not subscribing. Why would you do that? So make sure that you like, subscribe, and throw some comments in. Thank you all for joining the Joy Reid Show. See you on the next one, and goodbye for now.